whereby everywhere else, not just in the UK, but pretty much in the world, if you are good enough, you're old enough.
So today I'm joined by Phil Shuttleworth, who's a youth soccer coach here in San Diego. Phil, thanks so much for joining me on Someone You Should Meet.
No problem.
Yay! And it's really nice for me because you're a fellow Brit.
Right,
Yay!
yeah.
That I've got to ask you, what's a Lancashire lad doing in Oceanside? And just for our American friends that may be listening or watching this, Lancashire is a county, a part of the country in England. So that's what I'm referring to. But why are you here?
So from the northwest of England, it's a long story.
We've got plenty of time. You fill me in.
Ultimately, it's with work, and soccer is the field or the business that I'm in. Youth soccer coaching. That's what brought me here originally. When I was 17, I came out with the college that I was at in the UK to play as a last throw of the dice to maybe win a scholarship in the MLS, make it professional, etc., etc. Thousands of people have that story. And with me, it was just a massive wake-up call and a big signal that, you know, you're at the end of the road in terms of your playing career. Even though I was still young, I was injury-ridden and I just wasn't cutting it. I wasn't making the grade. And when I was over here, Claire, I was actually in Long Beach, California, playing for a British ambassadors team. And I just loved everything about the country. The weather, the people seemed really kind and open. The facilities were something like I'd never seen before. And the fact that the girls played, it was the first time they had us in this training camp. And for 10 days before we descended on this tournament, local tournament here. And it was a co-ed, as they say here. So boys mixed in with girls training camp, and I've never seen anything like it before. I never experienced playing with and against girls, and it felt a little bit strange, if I'm honest. But within day one, found out that the girls hit pretty hard out here. They play pretty fast, and I just found it fascinating. And I knew that if it didn't work out playing wise, I wanted to somehow end up here impacting the game in some way.
So that was how many years ago?
Giving away my age now, but that was probably, that must have been over 20 years ago now. That was over 20 years ago.
So you came to Long Beach, but you didn't stay there, did you?
No.
Where did you go from there?
So I went home, I went back and sort of had to realign my young life really. And now that I wasn't going to be a superstar footballer back home, what are you going to do? I'd always had a passion for soccer and or football and sports in general, really. And so a degree in sport and exercise science seemed like the most logical path. That then led me to get my master's degree in the same field, with a heavy emphasis on sports psychology and health-related fitness. So real quick, Claire, just a lot of my friends who were on the same program as me and certainly the same master's degree, their goal was to work with the elite level athlete, work with professionals and things like that. I went the opposite route and was more, what can I do for the 95%? You know, the everyday Joe, how can we keep them healthier? How can we have them living and enjoying life more? What does life look like with health-related fitness incorporated into it and things like that? So, yeah, I was very, very lucky that I was able to work in my passion, which is soccer or football, as they say.
Okay, so you went back and got your master's, and then how did you end up back here?
So whilst I was studying at university, I learned of an exchange program, coach exchange program, basically, whereby a company, Challenger Sports, still going strong actually to this day. I'm still friends with a lot of the staff there, employ young British soccer coaches to coach on their soccer camps in the summer. So it was perfect fit because I'd studied 9 months of a year in the UK in the wind and the rain and all of that. And then I'd come out for 3 months and work the summer soccer camps. And it was a great way to, number one, get my foot in the door in American soccer, American youth soccer. But number two, travel the country, learn, about people and different cultures and different customs. And so I did that for 3 years. First year I traveled the Midwest, second year East Coast, third year West Coast. So I think during that time I traveled and saw maybe 26, 27 states. And then the year I did my master's degree, like, as you know, a master's degree back home is 12 months intense. And so that was the first year in 4 years that I didn't get my American soccer fix in the summer. And I really missed it. Kind of had withdrawal symptoms. And so as soon as I was done with my master's degree, I just pulled on the network that I'd made over the last three summers. And I was just super fortunate that I was in the right spot at the right time and ended up getting a regional director's position with that company, based where their corporate office is based in Kansas City. Yeah. Wow.
It's quite common though, isn't it, for, young college graduates in particular from the UK to come out here and follow your kind of route, isn't it?
It really is. And it's not until you are out here that you realize how common it actually is. And, Brits in general, we're creatures of habit. And so we kind of gravitate, typically we gravitate to our own. And I mean, even in North San Diego alone, I am part of a pretty strong British community. I'd say on any given day, there are, 30 Brits in my phone ready to go out for a pint or
really?
be interested in a Sunday roast or whatever it is, roast dinner, and just keeping up traditions and things like that. But yeah, we get together on the big occasions. Certainly some of the big American holidays and things like that. We'll celebrate as a British community. And yeah, it's to answer your question, yeah, it's very, very common especially in soccer, to go the American route.
Why do you think it is that young Brits are so kind of respected when it comes to, moving over here and employing them, especially in a youth soccer role?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a really good question, Claire, because I think in the past, the Americans as a culture, or sorry, as a nation, have underestimated themselves, certainly in youth soccer, because they've done some big things. I mean, on the national front, in the women's game, they're the best in the world, and they have been for a long, long time. And so they've got to be doing something right and have some parts of the puzzle there. I think it boils down to just experience. There's that cultural connection with, and there's a lot of Americans that have a fascination with the British history and even the accent and things like that. And so I think it was just they're the guys with experience. And it's not just the Brits, it's a lot of Europeans, a lot of Eastern Europeans as well, follow that pathway and take advantage of the pathway in a good way, because there are opportunities for me as a young guy from the northwest of England. It was an opportunity to try something different and work in your passion in the sunshine.
Yeah, it beats all those cold, rainy mornings back in England, in Yorkshire or Lancashire for sure. Yeah. And how does youth soccer here compare to back home?
In terms of the level now, the gap is closing. I'd say they're still more technically adept and technically sound in the UK, but they're catching up at a rapid level now, and the gap is pretty minimal. in terms of the level of play. In terms of the following and the support for the sport nationally, we've still got some catching up to do in the States because, football, baseball, basketball are still the big three. Your typical American sports are, embedded and embroidered in the fabric of the nation. So it's hard to change that. But there's a subculture for sure of soccer and football, and it's definitely lost its negative, or I'd say it was, when I first came over, it was viewed as a very feminist movement and female sport, and it's kind of lost that stigma I'd say now.
Why do you think that was? Do you think it was because it's just not quite as physical as like American football, or why
Partly,
did
yeah. Again, just due to the fact that the American women were so prominent at the time. I mean, that team of 1999, have gone down in history now, and it was around that time when I came to the States, and so it was just seen as something that girls did to be successful and in a sports arena, and so that took a little getting used to, for sure.
Do you think that soccer will ever be kind of as popular here or as loved as, the real traditional American sports like baseball and American football?
I hope so. I do hope so, Claire. It's got a chance, and the reason it's got a chance is because for the last decade or so, if you follow the trends and the numbers, it has been one of, if not the fastest growing youth sport in the country. I think, believe it or not, I think lacrosse, somebody told me, has just taken over recently. But so you've got to imagine if that happened over the last decade and those kids are now born into the sport, just as it's as popular now to use an American phrase, toss some pigskin with your dad in a field, or take a baseball mitt and things like that. It's now just as popular to have a ball at your feet for the youth of today. So where I'm going with that is that they'll have children, and hopefully, that passion for the sport will be embedded in them as well.
Okay, what I don't understand, as someone who's been here a couple of years now, is that soccer is so popular at elementary level, at middle school level.
Yeah.
How is it that passion doesn't then transpire into adulthood and to the professional level? And I'm talking particularly about the men's team right now.
That is a really, really good question, Claire. And it's partly got a lot to do with the fact that, and again, just my opinion, but I know a few people share the same belief, is that soccer doesn't fit perfectly into their typical American sports pathway. So like you said, elementary school, if you're successful at that, you probably play a good level club at the same time, that propels you into high school sports, collegiate sports. And over here, good level collegiate sports are pretty much semi-professional, right? If you do well in college, you're one step away from a big ticket career as a professional athlete. And so that generally is the pathway. If you try and fit soccer into that pathway, and you take a soccer player that has followed that route, they'll be playing their first professional game aged 23, maybe 24.
Now, how is that different to the UK?
And so,
just explain, because it's very different, isn't it?
Whereby everywhere else, not just in the UK, but pretty much in the world, if you are good enough, you're old enough. So they can now pluck children as young as 8, 9, and 10 years old from elementary school, put them in a professional academy environment where they a lot of the kids sleep there at a professional soccer club. They have their meals there, they do their education there, and they're training 2 to 3 times a day in an academy or professional environment. So that is the major difference. And you can be a professional in one of the big leagues back home, age 15, 16, 17 now. And so by the time you're 23, 24, you're a seasoned professional.
You're mid-career, aren't you?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah,
and, you know, they say a soccer player peaks age 25 to 27. And so to start a professional career at age 23, 24, you're kind of a little bit behind. So something has to change with us culturally within the process if we're to truly rival the rest of the world.
You could flip that on its head though, Phil, because in England, there isn't a safety net for a lot of the players that don't make it. They don't have degrees.
Correct.
Or certainly they didn't.
They
didn't. I know that it's changing now. But here, the fact that they are at university, if soccer doesn't work out for them, they're leaving that university with a degree and something of a future. So that is the kind of flip side, I guess, to playing sport at a collegiate level.
Absolutely. And it's as a parent now and yourself as well, we'll have that path to cross at some point, you know, whereby out here it is, you use the right phrase, it is a safety net whereby you can have that conversation. And it is a conversation that is had in most households whereby you sit your child down and maybe it's not going to be a career as a professional athlete. However, you know, can you get a good degree and a good job or career with a respectable salary to create the life that you want as a great option or plan B. Whereas that really, up until recently, like you said, wasn't the case in the UK. It was professional or nothing. And it's still like that in certainly South America, I guess certain parts of Africa, whereby unless I make it pro, I'm probably going to go straight into a minimum wage job.
Interestingly, though, rugby union in the UK isn't like that. And generally speaking, for you to do well in rugby union, you have to have gone to a private school.
Yeah.
So that's more similar to kind of the situation here with collegiate sports, I would
definitely.
say.
That comparison is definitely as close as you can get to the American system. Yeah, for sure.
Talk to me about the facilities available for youth soccer players here.
Wow. And again, it's a long time since I've been back to the UK and really researched this side of it. And I know that the government back home are trying to pump a lot of money and a lot of initiatives into upgrading facilities and things like that. But it's hard. The difference here is like night and day. And I know there are some severely deprived working class towns across America and working class cities where, you know, the facilities aren't great. But for the most part, in every city, for the most part, there is a local YMCA or Boys and Girls Club where you can at least go and play in a safe environment. Outside of that, a typical elementary school here probably has comparable, if not better, facilities than a high school, if not a local college in the UK. The fact that a lot of teams have the privilege to play on manicured, if not state-of-the-art turf fields, just as a right, is mind-blowing to me. The fact that they've got goals on every field and those goals have nets on, and you know, everywhere is pretty well kept. It's a massive difference, and a lot of my British friends and Hispanic friends had to play at some sort of level, like, or get to some sort of state championship game to play under floodlights, for example, or in a stadium, for example.
Oh, that's a luxury.
Yeah, that's a luxury whereby our local high school kids would be devastated if they didn't get to play in a stadium environment. You know, that's just not good enough. And it's something that's really impressive, and it's something that's embraced here, and it should be. And certainly with the sort of Friday night lights feel to a town or a city, and a lot of high school pride, or pride in the local team and the local high school is seen for sure.
So Edward's just getting...
There's a little modest part.
There you go.
Right, nice.
Oh my gosh. I mean, if you showed that...
Yeah.
So, I mean, this, for a child who is into soccer back in the UK, this would be like living in heaven.
Correct.
If you showed that
Yeah.
to people back home, they would assume that this was a professional lower league club.
Correct.
Yeah.
And those are, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the Great Park in Orange County. And
this is the little stadium that you have.
yeah.
I mean, you know, your old club, Fleetwood
Yeah, Fleetwood.
Town.
So
I mean, that would be...
that's their stadium right there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
It's-
they're a second tier
Yes.
professional
Yes.
soccer club. And
Yes.
they play in a ground that's very, very similar to that. Yeah.
Crazy. Talk to me about club level soccer here.
Okay.
How competitive is it compared to maybe back home?
It's very competitive. And I choose that word, or I use that word differently out here to what I would back home. So in terms of the passion and the just level of fight between the children on the field, when you're using competitive in that realm, I'd say it's still, the UK still has the upper hand.
What do you mean by the upper hand?
They've got that street mentality, that grittiness about them, that graininess. They've put the hours in on their own, trying to just perfect their trade or be like their idol and their hero, as well as the training with their team, who, for the most part, 9 times out of 10, it's somebody's dad or somebody with a vested interest or somebody who once played. It's competitive over here in the fact that a lot of people want to do it. A lot of kids want to do it. They're interested. They're vested. And America as a nation don't like to be second best at anything. And so whereas it's somebody's dad in the UK, or even in basketball, American football over here, it's somebody's dad, somebody who's played. Here, they'll pay for a professional coach to put on 2 to 4 practices a week on a nice facility, and just propel the game as far forward in as short a space of time as possible. So that element of competition is fierce. There are several youth soccer clubs in every single city across America, it's very, very competitive, and everybody's competing to be the best at what they do. Everybody wants to be associated with the best, and that is one of the biggest cultural differences I found within the youth sport, is that because everybody wants to be the best, which is fine, there is a real lack of loyalty in youth in the youth soccer market right now.
How do you mean?
Well, if let's just say a child plays for their local hometown team, and that team isn't terrible, but they're just average. They're not brilliant. They're not great. They're fine. Chances are, if they're a strong player, they'll get an offer, as they would back home, from a rival, bigger club or better club, more successful club, let's just say, or team. And I'd probably say 8 times out of 10, if not more, they'll take the offer. Whereby back home, it's more of a case of, I play for my local team. My house is literally 5 minutes down the road. I don't have the means either to play elsewhere, and that's who I'm going to play for. Rain, hail or shine, good, bad or indifferent. And if we're not the best, that's our job to get better or to try and beat those guys one day. So I find that fascinating. I find it frustrating. I've worked on both sides of the coin, where I've recruited players and had players recruited, and that is, it's fierce. And so in terms of competition in that realm, you can't prepare for it.
Phil, how much does cost factor into this?
Massively.
Because soccer here is very expensive.
Yeah, it is. And believe it or not, Claire, it's not as expensive as other American sports like ice hockey.
But compared to, let's just kind of keep this comparison to football back home right now. Football back home is a poor man's sport. Anyone from any class.
Correct.
Anyone can play football. It is a cheap, free practically activity to engage in. And here, you mentioned before, people pay a lot of money to the likes of you. Yeah. So they do.
No, they do.
And so how does that affect the sport? And how does that make it an inclusive game? Because
you're right.
Not everyone has got, that type of money to be spending on their kids' activities. You're
absolutely right. And this is something that over the years has had me very, very conflicted, Claire. It has, in that how can you work in something and work to make something better and earn a living from what you love when it's excluding, when the cost of it is excluding a massive portion of potential players and families. So what we're talking about here then is America has a pay-to-play model, and it's imperfect, but it is a business, and it keeps people like myself and thousands of others with a roof over their head. But what we can try and do is do things in the right way. So, for example, within the pay-to-play model, there should be scholarship funds available, for example, to include more and make it more mutually inclusive. But again, you're right. It's something that I am very, very passionate about, that everybody should at least have the opportunity to play and try this sport before being excluded because mum and dad can't afford whatever it is, the equipment, the registration fees. It is very expensive.
So if a low-income child came to you and they were desperate to play, but their parents just couldn't afford to send them, like, what happens to that child?
So there's most clubs have a scholarship fund available, and so that child wouldn't necessarily miss out, especially if they maintained or attained a certain level of ability, right? However, there would be a process whereby it's a case of, are they bringing enough to the table in terms of ability to warrant, a scholarship, which again, for me, I have a hard time with.
But how is that fair, and how is that including people if to be able to play at just a young age and a lower level, you've got to be brilliant if you haven't got the money? How is that including everyone?
It's not, and it's unfair, and that's a part of the imperfect system that I'm currently working in right now. And there are a lot of, foundations and work behind the scenes to have it. People will say, and this is the other major difference as well, Claire, people will say, well, for those children, they can just play recreation soccer, which isn't, it's more fun and everybody, and it's more cost effective. But for me, I'm like, but it's not the level they seek. But
also, it's not just playing football. I mean, being part of a team has lots of other benefits.
Absolutely.
Social benefits.
Yep.
So it's not just, it's okay saying, well, you can just get a soccer ball and play on the street.
Right.
But if they're being excluded from those team building experiences, then that's kind of defeating the object a little bit, isn't it?
Absolutely is. And welcome to my world. And this is...
So what do you do about it then? What would you like to see change?
I'd love to see... what do I personally do? Yeah. I'd love to resurrect. I was head of a local street ball program, which was basically the term that they'd use here is pick up street soccer. For you and I back home, it's just a kick around or a street ball. It's just normal to us.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating to me that, number one, children weren't practicing enough on their own outside of these structured practices with their highly paid coach and things like that. And number two, that we were excluding in a lot of areas the street kid and those that couldn't financially afford it. So we set out with the goal of making soccer accessible. Can we just open up a court on a local school or school playground, roller rink, basketball court, tennis court, put a few goals up there and let the kids play? It's one movement that, again, fell by the wayside just due to us getting really, really busy with other things. But definitely was something that we want to resurrect. Things like that, little initiatives, people doing things, pro bono almost. And almost just pumping the brakes a little bit and saying, if the goal ultimately is to produce these national players and these national teams that are making a statement in the sport, let's include or be inclusive of those that could really help us here. And it's almost modeling or mirroring the street basketball model, in that I don't think there's any doubt that the USA are the best in the world at the sport. 1 million Olympic gold medals probably, and the strongest league in the world for sure. But you go to any given street ball court on any day of the week at any time, outside work hours or school hours, and it'll be packed with kids and adults that are just there perfecting their trade and playing for minimal fees. So I think we've got a lot to learn from other sports, for sure.
Talk to me about the parents. Because in England, I remember my dad would hate going to watch my brother on a Sunday morning play for the local Tickhill Town or whichever team it was he was playing for at the time. Because of the parents. He'd love going to watch my brother, but the parents, they're just so competitive and borderline aggressive. And I just wondered how the parents are here.
They can be... They can be unruly. They can be crazy, and they can be very vocal. What I always remind myself, or try to remind myself, is that with the stereotypical American soccer parent, it does come from a good place. I've stood on the sideline and witnessed things in the UK where it goes beyond what's happening on the field, and what the things that parents are shouting and saying is maybe got nothing to do with what's going on the field. I wouldn't say it's like that over here.
So no brawls?
Nah, there's been the odd brawl. There's, but not, they're over the top because they want the best for their child so badly. And they don't want to, it's hard to watch your child struggle, let alone make a mistake in a sport that they're good at and could cost their team, God forbid, that game or that play or that championship, whatever. So it comes from a better place, I feel. But yeah, they can be unruly. They can be a little crazy. And again, even with that, there are certain measures that are put in place now by the leagues that are designed to keep sidelines, shall we say, better behaved.
Cordial.
Yeah.
How are referees treated here at youth level?
I'd say horribly. I would.
Really?
Yeah.
How?
Not as bad as... They're not treated as bad as they are back home. But again, it's almost in our culture that, listen, referees, they're just an annoyance. And, if then the best referees are those that aren't heard and et cetera, et cetera. Over here, it's like with everything involved in our sport, is that there's no history or there's a lack of history, there's a lack of experience. And so you've got guys and girls just trying to do the best job they can based on what they've been taught. But the job that they're doing doesn't mirror the expectation of the coach, the parents, and sometimes the players. So they do get opened up to a lot of abuse. But and again, there are steps that are being put in place to stop that, because it is becoming an issue now. People aren't volunteering to referee. They're not as forthcoming. People are quitting, and without the refs, we can't play. So in my job, it's something that I've got to be super sensitive to, and have my coaching staff and myself and the parents within our soccer club respectful of the referees, regardless of whether we believe that they are doing a good job or not.
Tell me about some of the clubs you're involved with here in San Diego.
So my day job, I'm the technical director at Encinitas Express Soccer Club, which is very, very typical to most youth soccer clubs here in the States, or certainly Southern California. Boys and girls from 5 years old all the way through to collegiate age and level. So that is, my day job, so to speak. I'm also involved with Mission Hills High School, the varsity men's coach there. Just finished the first season under my belt, which was an experience for sure. Love the kids, love the high school setup, but very, very different to the club world that I'm involved in.
Yeah, in what way? How is high school football or high school soccer different?
High school soccer is more about what you talked about before. It's all inclusive. That is the opportunity for those that might not essentially get a chance with certain clubs to play. So that's a big difference. It's all inclusive. It's a short season. It's intense. So whereas with a youth club soccer outfit, your season will be 8, maybe 9 months of a year.
So more like an English
season. Soccer calendar.
Yeah.
Even though their games the league is only a 3-month league with a game each week. In high school, it's a 2-month league with 2 games per week. So you're playing every other day.
Wow.
And
That's
and
intense.
when you're not playing, you're training. Again, without going into the sports science of it all, are the kids overworked maybe and things like that? Yeah, there's a lot of overuse injuries and a lot of silly little niggling injuries that occur.
Like what? What are the most common injuries you see with that type of
in
schedule?
high school?
Yeah.
It's a lot of hamstring strains, a lot of small muscle tears, whereby in club soccer, it's your main soccer injuries. It's Osgood-Schladder as the kids are growing, and maturing. It's ACL injuries, MCL injuries, a lot of knee ligament tears, ankle ligament tears as well. But those are the main ones in club.
Talk to me about concussions in soccer.
Wow.
Because although there is a lot of information out there now about the link between the NFL and brain injuries, so too is there information out there now about soccer, particularly young girls heading the ball.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
My take on it, Claire, has changed a lot over the last probably 2 or 3 years.
Okay, how so?
I came over as any typical Brit that's grown up heading the ball. I grew up, it's all I knew, and it was a big part of my
What position did you play when you used to play?
I ended up as a right-sided defender, so right back. Probably played some of my best stuff as centre back, and there's a lot of heading involved there. And so the way my viewpoint on it has changed was, no, there's nothing wrong with heading. It's part of the game. It's something we do, and that's that. As long as it's coached correctly, everybody will be fine. And there's still some truth to that. It needs to be coached correctly. They've now outlawed heading in youth soccer over in the States. I believe like they have in the UK now as well, of taken this stance until you're 12 years old. No heading in games or practices, which is the correct move in my opinion. And not because of the damage it could potentially do for immediate concussion, even though that is a serious, having seen it now firsthand, and that's something that changed my viewpoint. I saw 2 young girls of high school age that I coached that were forced to quit the sport because they had 3 concussions in a season. And when you actually see it in the flesh, Claire, and you see a teenage girl literally punch drunk from a ball that's hit her, and she doesn't know what day it is. She can't answer. She doesn't know how to pronounce her last name. It's kind of scary, and it does take it back a bit. My support for the rules and the mandates that are now in place comes from a fear of the long-term effects it can have. And we're seeing it now with the NFL, and we're seeing, boxers and those combat, heavy physical activity sports that are seeing a lot of contact with the head and a lot of concussions over time. And the outcome of that in later life isn't worth anything in our sport. It's not worth a championship. It's not worth a goal. It's not worth it. So that's where I'd go with that.
Okay, I just want to read you something. This is a report by the University of Glasgow. It says that former professional footballers, this is a UK article, by the way, so I'm saying footballers, and we obviously mean soccer players here. Former professional footballers, soccer players, are 3.5 times more likely to suffer from dementia and other serious neurological disease diseases, a landmark study has found, confirming a long suspected link between sport and brain injury. You mentioned earlier about the long-term effects.
Yeah.
How worrying are the long-term effects, do you think, of these type of repetitive brain injuries?
I think they're very, very worrying. And the scary part for me is that it's hard, isn't it, to do the research and get the actual stats and the numbers. All we can do is take preventative measures. But it's such a broad spectrum of long-term, detriment that can have, like you mentioned, dementia, and
which often doesn't actually rear its head until later on in life.
Correct.
Yeah.
By which point there might be symptoms of depression or other mental health issues that, current research is saying could be a result of brain trauma and concussion and repetitive head to ball or head to player contact throughout sport.
What about helmets?
It's funny you should ask. I don't ever think. Well, number one, there's always then a danger of injury to the other player due to the type of gear. When I first came to the States, there was a piece of headgear called, it was either full 90 or total 90, and partly it was a business venture, but partly to protect children from getting concussion from heading the ball. And it was basically a sponge padded head helmet. But I don't know. It got phased out, and you don't see anybody wearing them these days. I think partly due to, there was an article that came out that said they don't really work. There was an article that came out that said it actually is producing more force because the head is now heavier with it on, and so it's actually detrimental. And I think partly because it wasn't trendy and fashionable. Do I think it's the answer? I'm not too sure. I think there's a lot more that can be done in the teaching of heading the ball if it is going to still continue to be a feature of the game. And
so do you think that it could eventually be like phased out of the sport?
Certainly in the youth game, yeah, I do.
How do you feel about that?
Again, conflicted. Only because I'm a bit of a traditionalist and I don't like any massive radical changes to the sport, but ultimately, if it's for the safety of the players and preserving their quality of life after they finish playing, it makes sense for sure.
Let's talk about the women's sport right now, because the women's national team are on fire. They're world champions again.
Yep.
And with some real big role models like Megan Rapinoe, for example. How important is it that young girls have role models like her and the rest of her colleagues to kind of, inspire them in this game?
It's massive. And it's not just, I'm waiting for the day, Claire, where not just young girls can have female soccer players as role models, but where the boys can proudly wear the girl names on the back of their jerseys. And
actually, for the boys, who do they have that's on a similar playing field to the likes of Megan Rapinoe right now in the game?
On the national team, it's hard. There's Christian Pulisic, who's probably the hot topic right now, who plays his football at Chelsea. But outside of that, like you say, there are 5 and 6 names in the women's national team that girls want to be like, and the heroes, the soccer heroes for the boys are still, your Messis and Ronaldos. So, but back to the original question, how important is it? It's massive, and it's something that I'm fully behind and I fully support. It's something that was so inspiring, but also just so evident to me when I first came to the States that girls not only have a platform, but the opportunities and the role models for sure.
So here we have last year's final, USA and the Netherlands. Really, really impressive. There's Megan Rapinoe, who we were just talking about. What do you think about their fight for equal pay?
It's something that I support. For me, these ladies absolutely justify it because their argument is we're better than the men.
They are.
We're better than the men.
They are. The stats prove it.
And so why not? Why not in every other walk of life now? If a woman does as good a job or a better job than her male counterpart, she'll be given the pay that reflects that, as well as everything else that goes with it, the accolade, the recognition. And so, yeah, it's something that I actually support, and good luck to them. I hope they get what they deserve.
Why does women's soccer not draw the crowds? And it's the same case in the UK to an extent as well. Why do they not draw the same crowds as men's soccer games?
It's a good question, and it's one that I don't fully have the answer to, because maybe it's, like you say, a macho thing, in that the actual market is still predominantly young males. And, is it hip right now? Is it cool to say, I'm going to go and support, I'm going to go and watch a female soccer game? I just don't think it's seen as cool. But if you go and watch them play, they're serious and they can play.
I suppose, if it's ever going to be cool, now is the time, riding on the back of the national women's team and success.
Definitely, and we've had it before, and I'd like to see a more sustained change. The likes of Rapinoe, Carly Lloyd, they are household names now. And that alone, I think, is going to go a long, long way. We're seeing it in the punditry as well. A lot more females on panels and things like that. That coaches, the transition will be as well. I'd love to see more female coaches not only involved, because there are quite a few female coaches involved. There are very few female coaches that coach males, even at the youth level for sure, whereby I'd say probably 80% of female youth soccer players have a male coach. So that has to be.
Why is that?
It's still a very sort of male-dominated world that we work in. It is.
Even with the popularity of women's soccer, especially at a young level. Yeah.
And it was funny because at a recent course that I just did, we were asked that question, and there is no real reason. And it's a case of why are the majority of preschool and elementary teachers female? It's very, very rare that a kid comes home and says, "Oh, Mr. So-and-so, my preschool teacher or my kindergarten teacher." And it's nothing more than probably stigma. that's attached to it, and people just following the stereotype, and it's going to take people breaking those stereotypes to make a difference.
You mentioned people like Megan Rapinoe, who I'm sure is a hero to millions of boys and girls across the country. Who were your soccer heroes growing up?
It's funny. I just liked the really hard-working, no frills sort of soccer players. So again, I'm showing my age now, but my team is Manchester United. That's my favourite team. But
I'm going to ask you a little bit about Man United.
I'd rather you didn't at the moment.
Well, I was going to say, I will. Don't worry, I'll bring that up in a second.
No, they. So my all-time favourite player at Manchester United, I've got two. Bobby Charlton, he was a little bit older from the 60s, World Cup winner. But Ryan Giggs, just his longevity in the game, is on the field, ultimate professional, looked after himself, looked after his body, adapted his game over the years and things like that. So
he was another one that went professional very young. Very young. Was he 17?
Yeah, I think he played his first professional game at 17, but he was recruited, I think, as young as 11 years old. He was with Manchester United.
Okay, so. I think I remember watching a documentary on him when I was much younger, because my brother also liked Ryan Giggs. But a great example. Wonder, Edward, if we could get Ryan Giggs up there, so show people what we're talking about. Man United. Oh dear. So talk to me. Why have they struggled so much since Alex Ferguson retired back in 2013 now?
They... Well, the competition got better all of a sudden. Yeah. It wasn't all of a sudden.
Here we go, there's Giggsy.
Yeah, there he is.
40 years.
Wow.
Career highlight. 40 years he was playing football. Must have
he's
started
40
very
years,
young.
He's 40 years old right now, I think. So
it is in his 40s, isn't he now?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
So he's...
So, number 11.
But he was terrifying in his in his prime, in his early days. There was nothing really like him. He was compared to the likes of George Best, and he
was. I remember when he was in his kind of prime at Man United, he was compared to George Best.
And so for me, he could do things that very few were capable of. And
the Welsh Wizard was his nickname.
And he's now head coach of the Welsh national team.
He is. In fact, my dad's Welsh, so I'm
fully behind.
Fully behind Giggs and the Welsh side. So the competition's got better.
Yeah, the competition got better, and they've just not found. They were huge shoes to fill. Alex Ferguson's were, and obviously, as a lifelong United fan, he is the be-all and the end-all. He's the greatest ever. But I will say this, I think he knew that, I wouldn't say that the ship was sinking, but the tides were turning, let's say,
they
when he retired. I think that...
And by that, we mean that clubs like Man City, who were the perennial underachievers, all of a sudden had a massive injection of cash and started to dominate the Premier League.
And I think he felt that. I think he felt that it was definitely a time. So much as we've never replaced him.
And we've got Sir Bobby Charlton.
There we go.
Yeah.
Our younger
the
viewers.
Hero. There we go. So he was part of our only World Cup winning squad, 1966.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. We've still not brought football home yet, have we?
No. And I think we'll still be waiting a while, even though they're experiencing a little bit of an upswing, the England national team right now. Yeah,
they are.
And so hopefully we've got the European Championships coming up this coming summer.
We do.
So we'll see what they can do there. But
how are your feelings going into there?
Same as the last World Cup, really. Top four, like semi-finals would be amazing.
So we've got a bit of a pressure now because we overachieved.
I
really.
think we overachieved.
We did. We thought we were going to win it, but let's be real. We kind of. We were good. We would have taken that at the beginning of the last World Cup tournament. Yeah. We would have taken that finish.
Yeah, I think we're still missing some pieces. The defence is still one, maybe two players short of being able to contend with those world-class forward lines. There's question marks over our goalkeeper right now. But we've got a chance. We've got a chance. Outside of probably the favourites, again, will be France and maybe a Belgium.
Yeah.
But outside of those, we're probably second favourite.
Who do you fancy then for the Euros?
It's so difficult for me to look past France.
Yeah.
I just feel as though they've got every single piece, every single position. I feel as though they've got arguably the best player in the world in that position, or one of, and their reserve for every position is also a real talent. And so it's hard for me to look past France, even though they're getting a little bit older now, and the coach is probably on his last term.
Well, it certainly will be an interesting tournament. So you've got kids now. How old are your kids?
My own boys are 7 years old and 4.
And are they into football, into soccer?
They are. My 7-year-old has just got into it in a big way this last sort of 12 months.
How do you feel about that? Because you've gone from playing it yourself to being a coach. Now you've got a son who's...
Obviously, I love it. I like being that... Before I had kids and envisioned parenting and being a dad, I wanted to be that proud dad of a kid who loved the sport that I loved. And so I'm just enjoying that at the moment.
Do you get a bit competitive? Come on,
I do. I do. I get the other way though. He still lives in a bubble right now, whereby in his world he is untouchable. There's Lionel Messi, there's Cristiano Ronaldo, and then there's him. That's how a 7-year-old mind works. Yeah. And so rather than be competitive, I'm the other way. I'm the bad news bearer and the realist of, hey, you do realise you probably need to work a little bit harder or try this before you get to Cristiano's level or Messi's level. And the conversations are all innocent right now. Where I do or I'm going to find it very, very difficult is when he is a little bit older and his skills are a little bit more refined. I'm going to find it very, very difficult not to be coach dad.
Yeah. Do you feel that urge to coach him and to correct him?
I do. And right now when we're just kicking around in the yard or on the tennis court or wherever we're playing, I offer a little bit sort of advice, but if he doesn't want it, there's no harm, there's no force in it. But I think as he gets older, and I feel as though he needs the advice and the tips to get to where he thinks he wants to be. That could be an interesting crossroad.
Now, your wife is actually also from Yorkshire, which is my home county.
Yeah, she is, yeah.
So what's it like? So you're both over here. What's it like raising two American kids? Because they're not English, are they?
No, they're not. They are full-on American. They've got certain British traits.
Like what?
Some of the words that they'll pronounce are still very, very British, My oldest will pronounce his T's where Americans might pronounce it with a D.
Yeah.
But then he'll also drop his T's like water or better and things like that, which is a very, very British slang.
Yeah, it really
slang
is.
way. And so it's hard because I used to get shouted at back home by my parents for not pronouncing my T's.
Oh, yeah.
And here I'll be like, if he drops them, it's like, it's okay because I know you're trying to be British kind of thing. But they've got, these days it's so easy for them to stay more connected with their British family and their British roots with the likes of, Google Hangouts and WhatsApp and Skype.
Skype's those video calls are just like a lifesaver, aren't they?
They are. So they stay a lot more connected to their British roots and ancestry than I think I did when I first came over. but it's very different raising raising American kids as a Brit. The school systems, the education systems, and you just end up falling in line and respecting the culture that you have to embrace, because that's the sacrifice that you made. You know, we chose to leave the UK and embrace everything that America had to offer. And so for me, you've got to go wholeheartedly with it and you know, just be American.
What parts of living here do you still kind of like struggle with a little bit, or still feel like you're a bit of an outsider?
Politics is very different, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was never big into politics back home, but I feel as though over here you're almost forced into an opinion. And I still like to sort of keep my head down and say, I don't really have an opinion. It still makes me feel really uncomfortable. But you're almost pressured in a lot of ways to choose a side. And so that was a big cultural shock for me.
Because in England, generally speaking, it's rude to discuss politics.
It is.
You don't
really
ask.
is.
Generally speaking, you don't ask people.
No, you don't.
You know which political party you're affiliated with,
Right.
and here it is very different,
Yeah.
and it's kind of almost a little bit. You know, you're a bit embarrassed. You don't want to rock the boat
Don't-
or cause an
offend
argument with it.
anybody,
Yeah. So maybe we're just a bit too apologetic, perhaps.
Yeah. So that's a big cultural difference. Then there's just, silly little things like the food is just, I crave certain foods that I can get in the States now whenever I go back, but just the sheer portion size, everything's so much bigger at first. And over here, everyone is very invested in something and in everything over here, whereby back home, especially in the working classes, it's I go to work and I just kind of do what I do. I plod along, whereas here they're all involved in some group and some activity, and I do like it. I do, I like the energy. I like the pace of it all, but every now and then it's exhausting.
It's funny because you and I both come from very working class northern roots.
Yeah.
And we're now here in this fabulous place with great
really
weather
is.
that's actually very affluent in places too,
Yes.
raising our kids here.
Yeah.
And like the night and day between our upbringing and what our kids now have, like how does that sit with you?
It sits well in that I feel as though I'm trying to provide my children with the opportunities that maybe weren't available to myself growing up. However, where it's difficult, Claire, is that I find I have a hard time when they take it for granted. I do. And although I don't want to be the grandpa who says, you kids don't know how lucky you are, and in my day we had to do this, it's so evident, like from what you've just described, having come from where we've come from to the life that we lead now, like, and some of my friends back home, still can't believe that they don't understand what I do for a living. They don't understand how that is a job. How can you just coach football or soccer and that's all it is? And it's in the sunshine, and it's with, nice kids who listen and are polite and things like that. I feel really, really privileged, very, very fortunate. lucky, but also, there's a lot of hard work and sacrifice that has gone to this point, and that'll continue. But
so how do we as parents then make sure that our kids don't take this for granted
hard.
and they don't grow up to be spoiled? And
it's very hard. I think traveling is one way. And the beautiful thing about America is you can take a vacation within the same state.
Oh, that's what we've done the last few years. We've holidayed in California. Yeah, it's just amazing.
And experience different cultures and different backgrounds and different places and things like that, different customs. So traveling is one, and, teaching good life lessons there. I think have them just integrated in so many different groups and keep it real diverse is what we try to do anyways. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but
because obviously San Diego isn't all about being affluent and living in the sun. There are deprived areas here. There's a big immigrant population here, and so it's about, I see it as about kind of educating our kids that, this is a big society, and it's a society that's made up of lots of different members. And so just because we're fortunate to live in this area, that's a very different life in that area for other people. And it's about kind of...
No, I couldn't agree more. And it's as much as... I think the answer is not to blinker our children. And, we pass on our way to school and home, we pass a lot of homeless people, for example, and there are questions that they ask and things like that, and it's just a case of being as truthful on their level as you can be, and explaining that not everybody is lucky enough to have a home. Do you understand that? Not everybody is lucky to have food every day, and my 7-year-old kind of gets that now, and he's very caring, nurturing, and he doesn't understand why, and he wants everybody just to be the same. 4-year-old's still a little young to understand, but just being as honest on their level as we can be, and not having them blinkered, I think is part of the process for sure.
On the subject of homelessness, my girls are still really shocked at the amount of homeless people here. And actually they, a few times a year, we go and hand out food to homeless people, which I think's, a good way to get them involved and, just make them aware of the situation.
Yeah.
So Phil, how or where would you like to see soccer in San Diego develop over the next few years?
It's a good question. I'd like to see one of the professional teams. I'd like us to have a professional team. Right now there are some professional soccer teams within San Diego, or bidding for the right to be the team of San Diego. And I'd like us just to, as a city, get behind one. I'd like the female programs to continue on the path that they're on. I think there's some real good level female soccer in San Diego. On the boys' side, San Diego itself is a hotbed for soccer. There's certain parts of Texas, certain parts of Florida is 3 hotbeds. On the boys' side, if we do the right thing, we should be producing national pool players for sure from San Diego. But I'd like to see a more united front to it all. We get carried away a lot of the times in working against each other in our pursuit of being the best, whereby it's okay to a point, And then if we came together for the betterment of our national pool and our national team, I think that's where I'd like to see it go. Yeah, I'd leave it at that. But getting behind a professional team would be good, because the one thing that drives me crazy about San Diego is its lack of sports or professional sports teams since the Chargers left. I know there's the Padres at baseball, but it's hard to get behind a team here when compared to real sports cities like a Boston or a New York or something like that.
But how much do you think the weather has to do with that? Because San Diego, because the weather is so good, is not a spectator sports city in the main. Why would you pay money to go and sit inside watching something when you can go outside and do it yourself?
It is a factor, but I'll tell you this: it's a double-edged sword, that one, because at the youth level, people are using the weather as an argument as to why we should be so good.
As a positive, as a draw.
Because we never need to cancel because of the rain, or we never need to rent indoor facilities, and we've got the sunshine, we should be playing year round and things like that. So if that's the case, it's not 100% true, but if that's the case, why aren't we producing these amazing athletes that we would pay to go and watch on a professional team?
Interesting.
So
yes, it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it?
It is.
Well, Phil, listen, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for coming on to Someone You Should Meet. No problem at all. And good luck with everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's nice to speak to a northern lad.
Yeah, likewise. Likewise.